Now, just place ourselves in the presence of the Lord, because these retreats involve the Holy Spirit. So we ask the Holy Spirit to inspire our thoughts, to give us a spirit of calm and receptive listening, that He may minister directly to our hearts and have a word for each one of us as we wait upon Him. As I was quietly praying before the Blessed Sacrament, it was coming to me that the Lord has a project in our coming together which might seem accidental to us, but it is not, insofar as we are all engaged in His work and therefore are His channels on earth. And the Holy Spirit is very much at work when that happens. And I noticed also as I came into your midst that you were in silence, and I thought, this is good news, because then the Lord is free to act. And in that context, I'd like to start by just gazing again at the figure of Elijah, who of course at this vigil of St. John the Baptist is somebody that one tends also to remember how he, as we find in the first book of Kings, chapter 19, went apart. He went into a cave and spent the night there. Then the word of the Lord came to him, saying, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" That word, Elijah, we can replace by our own name. Quid hic facis? The demand that comes to us in retreat. What are you doing? Where are you at? It's a putting the brakes on. And unfortunately, and this too was coming to me as I reflected on what it is to give a retreat among priests, fellow priests. If one looks around the panorama of priestly retreats, often done with the bishop, which is a good thing, and all the clergy together, but I've noticed that actually they combine that horizontal element of encounter with each other, which is a wonderful thing, with the vertical. And the combination isn't ideal for entering into mode. And although it's a blessed occasion when we find our fellow priests and are refreshed, the other thing sometimes is lacking. It's not enough just to be fed by intellectual messages. We need a long time of silent mode of receiving. It's a different dynamic. And unfortunately, I think that perhaps is the adventure of grace that on the level of many dioceses sometimes might be not there. Because if one gets, even at that point of potential refreshing, more of the other, more of the same thing, then the Lord, even then, is somehow a little bit frustrated in what He perhaps wants to do with each individual in an encounter of two per two, just that one-to-one, eyeball-to-eyeball love encounter when He will minister to our soul. And I noticed here that it's all there, that perfect structure. The Lord is reigning in this house all the time from that monstrance, and there's a cushion of peace. Angels are here, and human angels are attending to Him. Grace is here. The Lord is served. He is king of this bit of geography. And so we're entering into all that. It's a perfect cushion on which to rest and to be ministered to. And then, of course, Elijah comes out with his complaints. They're after him as well. He's the only one who's faithful. Well, maybe there's some of that coming to us as well. Are we sometimes not a little frustrated that they're after me because they're going after new things? And sometimes there is an element of loneliness out there if we're trying to be faithful to what our gut reaction is telling us. My Lord is not being handled well, and I don't know what to do about it. Then he was told, "Go out and stand on the mountain before the Lord." Now we notice that he goes to a holy mountain. Things happen when we come apart. That's happening right here. A monastery, where there is enclosure, is an extraterritorial part of this cosmos. This is heaven's plot. Only God reigns here, and angels inhabit it. Therefore that is in a way something on earth corresponding to this horror. But it's ours every time we come into the sacred sphere. We forget that. Sursum corda, which actually is found in the Greek as well, way back. Anotas cardias, the hearts are to be lifted up. It's something which has come from the early church. And at that point, one is in only the divine sphere. Now, therefore, every time we come to the altar, that should be there. But is it actually there in our minds? Sometimes we celebrate at the end of the day with all the weight of the day on our mind. It's not easy, even at that point, to get into mode. I was talking to a very good priest, actually, near us in Ireland, and he is chaplain in the Irish Army. But he said this amongst us priests one day in just casual conversation, and he meant it. The only time in the day when I'm somewhat alone, that is, he meant not disturbed, is actually at the altar. Therefore, the barricade is so thin that all the time he's eaten alive as soon as he's available. That might be the position also of you, perhaps more than myself, because I have a certain defense, but you're always being eaten. And I remember our prior telling us one time, if the priest is always to be eaten, you must be good to eat. And of course, if we're always being eaten, there's nothing more to give. We're just drained. And many priests are giving all the time. And this gratuitous moment of love, even in retreat, may not be there, if even there one is ministering to one's brethren, as it were. Go out and stand on the mountain before the Lord. For at that moment the Lord was going by. There is a verse, isn't there, to take the Lord while he is passing, while he is there. And that element of grace passing is something in retreat very much to be not lost. St. Augustine says, Timeo Dominum transiuntem. I fear the Lord passing, that is, not to have grasped him. Well, grace passes, and we need to be attentive. There's a danger in unattended moments that graces are lost when they were there. It's too late to grasp them when they've gone, the present. Well, again, retreats are moments tasted. They're moments apart on which we rest, and they give sense to all the others if they're well lived. We stand outside the globe and look on. Where am I going? And if one does well, a retreat on an annual basis, one can do that actually, comparing each one. For at that moment the Lord was passing by. A mighty hurricane split the mountains and shattered the rocks before the Lord, but the Lord was not in the hurricane. Now the old translation is non in commotione Dominus. The Lord was not in commotion. And that's true, isn't it? The Lord is not in commotion. And that perhaps is also a secret to be learned on a daily basis even. Commotion. Things can be done without commotion. A conversation can be in commotion or can be serene. The same conversation. How much energy is lost, both in encounter with people, that is, doesn't help, raising the voice, when the same thing could be handled also for the good of the soul. For if we raise the voice, we lose peace also with our God, do we not? If we're losing control. That element of going through the day without commotion. Normally that should be the natural following on of that encounter with him. If it's not happening easily, then those commotions, that losing of control, will be more frequent, because we are bombarded by things which solicit that loss of control. Serene mode, never changed. Now, after the hurricane, the earthquake, and he was not in the earthquake. And then the fire, not there again. And after the fire, now this translation is not easy. In this modern translation, the one that's read in church, the Jerusalem Bible, we have, after the fire, a light murmuring sound. Now in the old translation, which came into the English language, because the translation of the English Bible under James I in 1611 is the one that gave the English language as we have it. And the same thing happened, I believe, in Germany with the Lutheran translation to some extent, that some words came in there and stayed in the pattern of expressing things. And it happened in Welsh too, the same period, with the Welsh Bible, which standardized things and gave the poetic, all these words which we didn't think about, expressions which have come from the first translations into the vernacular. Well, here we have the still, small voice. And it's come into our hymns as well. It's a beautiful expression, actually, and says it all. And that stillness, to be heard, needs our corresponding stillness. Now, with regard to that, I would like to zoom into just one element of it in this introductory meditation. What constitutes receptive stillness? Because it's all the work of a retreatant. Psychologically, there are elements which enter into play. I mentioned the physicity of separation, the choice of a place not coinquinated and contaminated by otherness, by lesser messages. That is happening. The Jesuits, as you know, have a whole tradition and discipline of that, 30 days, and they're quite demanding actually. And it has to be done properly or we can't expect the Lord to be free to act. And therefore things are asked. Things like the possibility of contact with others through even texts on the mobile phone, that kind of thing, they do matter. Because the more profound retreat is, the more it's going to be damaged and the more we're going to sense our fragility. Because a text might be a whole world of somebody else's unexpected problems and it's going to shatter our freedom of thought. So a short retreat has to be fairly intense. And by the way, I've noticed that retreats often are more intense when they are short. Whereas if they have long ones, especially with people, if they're more than 24 hours, they tend to get a bit loose at the edges. People start to go into recreative mode. Whereas a short, sharp, intense retreat, for instance 24 hours with all-night adoration, each person taking an hour, is very, very powerful. And it can be done with ordinary people who are very receptive to these things and can be ministered to by the Lord very well if you leave them with Him at night. Give them strong messages in the day, keep recreation to a minimum, let the Lord be Lord for 24 hours, and things happen. Not expensive, not fussy, but it works. The Lord is doing it. And these things, I believe, also generate vocations. Give them the Lord, not gimmicks. More of the same thing. Things to last must be deep, must be divine. The human has its human value and its human effect. So, first of all, that's separation. But then there's more. The stillness of the mind also is nourished by all the strata of our being pacified. Now, on the basis of the 24-hour period, there are moments which favour that stillness, and the devil knows it. And what has he done? Look around the life of the church in the last 40 years, basically. One thing has been hugely eroded. It's the intensity of the morning, the early morning of the consecrated soul. If you look around carefully, bit by bit, generally speaking, in the last 40, 50 years, the norm of a prolonged time given just to the vertical before things started to happen has come back into line with the working day. Often, okay, because meetings go late into the night. But often also because people don't realize that after a certain point, conversations are no longer helpful. And television certainly is not the best contribution to the day. But that eats into the night and so into that prayer time. So what's happening? On a daily basis, that stillness, we haven't access to it. If we're not careful, because we're starting straight with noise. Now, therefore, there are periods, and the devil knows it, when this works more easily. That discipline of an early rise and a virgin time, where God starts as prime mover, is far more powerful. Beginnings check and consequences follow. That is, that firing of the rocket in the right direction, rather than trying to adjust its course after it started. It means just that we've received before trying to give. And therefore, in practice, that stillness demands a certain discipline of the will, that I will also safeguard my quality of day. I will have a certain moment only for myself and my God. We can't be so giving that we're giving also of our intimacy with Him. La charité bien ordonnée commence chez soi. Charity well ordered begins at home. That is, one has to be charitable also to one's soul. Parce tibi, have mercy on yourself. And often, it's not the maximum of doing that is the most efficacious, but the optimum. We don't always have to be so perfect in our programming and manufacturing, even physical objects like brochures, as to lose somehow that gratuitousness of being able to rest in the Lord. Because, after all, that's of the order of the material, but this is of a different order. And if it's not there, I am quite convinced the Lord is not free to shower those blessings that He wanted to over a simplified channel. So a certain simplicity and essentiality gives liberty. Not everything on earth always has to be done. There's another order also of values in the order of doings. So the third element is this, that the mind itself needs to protect itself, because unfortunately our inner stillness is damaged by the number of words ingested. The mind full of words is saturated. It is in a state of multiplicity and complexity. Complexity is bending all over the place. Multiplicity, these manifold drainage systems from the soul. There are too many things tugging on our mind, and too many things crowding it and soliciting its shared attention. Now, therefore, there are certain words, certain flows of messages, which we have to write, to eliminate. Now, it's not indifferent if we just switch on a switch, a knob, a control, which will automatically, as soon as we do so, flood our interior with other people's thoughts. Modern communication is full of words, and if we're exposed to it, we are full of words. Now, that's going to damage profoundly our inner simplicity. We don't have to be always exposed to words. Now, that's a concrete choice. I'm in the car. It's my choice if I put on a knob which will give me for 2 hours words. Or if I quietly say the Rosary, the Chaplet of Divine Mercy, the Jesus Prayer, it's quite a different mode of being in those 2 hours. Old Nick, the devil, knows it full well. Just turn that knob and I've got lots of lovely things for you to listen to. And also we're taking in all that he wants us to hear. And unfortunately, we are influenced by all that he wants us to hear. Now add to that also, if at home we choose to fill our minds with the visual. Now, that's even more powerful, especially for virgin souls. We are more fragile. So that is also a personal choice. Now, the absence of all that, relatively, immediately opens up a different sphere of wanting a word of a different order, a thirst. We are damaged in these last 40, 50 years. In the last 20 years, there's been a huge increase of the number of messages coming from all sources. Now that brings me to one last point I'll attack this night, because we haven't got time to develop it all in one go, but it's the question of how much we use the available channels of communication. Because if we, in every free moment, immediately go to a channel of communication, whether it be even a text, or things like an email, or all these new forms of communication, if all those free moments automatically are someone else's, even though we're alone, then unfortunately we're going to very, very hard to find that the Lord is able to minister to our soul. We are then the risk of coming to our people with more of what they've already got.